This story comes from further south in the Appalachian chain, in the Forgotten Slopes near McDowell County, West Virginia. For one family, that land was heritage, property passed down, steeped in coal mines long abandoned, ridges wrapped in mist, and woods so thick they felt endless. The narrator grew up breathing that mountain air. His childhood was one of trails, laughter, and exploration. His twin brother was his shadow, his mirror, the other half of every memory. The land felt like a kingdom to them, a secret fortress hidden from the rest of the world. But time has a way of pulling people away from the places that shape them. By their early 20s, life crowded in. College, jobs, relationships. Trips to the cabin became rarer until eventually they stopped altogether. 6 years passed without the narrator setting foot on that land, 8 for his brother. In 2017, a bitter divorce fractured the narrator's life. He felt hollow, restless, needing space to breathe. He decided to return to the cabin for a retreat, to find quiet among the trees. His brother, sensing how fragile he was, chose to join him for a few weeks. Better together, he had said. The cabin was deep in the forest, reachable only after a 20-minute drive from the town of War, followed by nearly an hour's hike through dense woods. There were no roads, no cell towers, no lights. Once it had been powered by generators, but they hadn't been touched in years. The approach filled them with uneasy nostalgia. What they found filled them with dread. The forest had started swallowing the cabin whole. Vines crept across the roof like veins, insects nested in the corners, and moss spread thick across the wood. It looked less like a home and more like a grave the earth was reclaiming. And yet, beneath the decay, the land still hummed with something, an ownership the brothers had never truly earned. As the narrator stood lost in thought, his brother's dog, Peach, let out a bark that shattered the silence. Peach had been with his brother for 5 years, rescued from an illegal fighting ring. He had been broken, scarred, terrified of the world. But under the brother's care, he had transformed into a gentle soul, a dog whose loyalty ran deeper than blood. Peach rarely barked. When he did, the brothers listened. Now he barked furiously toward the back of the cabin, toward the old sealed-off mine shaft. Even as children, that shaft had frightened them. It was nothing but darkness, swallowing light, swallowing sound. They had never dared go near it. And now Peach was growling, straining at his leash as if he wanted to rip into whatever might be inside. Eventually the brother calmed him, but the unease lingered. They decided to try restoring the cabin. It was in no shape to sleep in, so the plan was to camp outside the first few nights. The younger brother drove back into town for supplies, leaving the narrator alone with Peach. The forest was quiet at first, but then Peach's behavior began to shift. One moment calm, the next stiff and snarling at the empty doorway. His hackles rose, ears pinned, body locked on something the narrator couldn't see. He searched the trees, expecting a bear or maybe a fox, but the woods remained still. Hours passed in that rhythm. Silence, then Peach on edge, then silence again. When his brother returned with the tent, the narrator told him everything. His brother tried to soothe his nerves. Peach wasn't used to the wilderness, he said. The sense of wild animals could explain it. It was logical. It was comforting. But it didn't erase the unease. That night, they pitched the tent just outside the cabin. They built a fire, tried to laugh, tried to relax. But Peach never let his guard down. His body remained tense, ears twitching, eyes scanning. Around 11:30, the woods broke their silence. A branch snapped, heavy, purposeful. Both brothers turned, their eyes catching the shape crouched between the trees. It was a person. The narrator's hand went to the pistol at his hip. He called out, demanding to know who was there. Peach didn't bark this time. He just stood rigid, hair bristling, every muscle straining toward the figure. The person rose slowly, turned without a word, and slipped back into the dark. The brothers stood frozen. The fire cracked behind them. The forest swallowed the silence again. Logic said they should leave, but fear, strangely, can make people hesitate. They weren't ready to abandon their family's land, not yet. They moved inside the cabin instead. The structure was weak, but it had a door, windows, and walls between them and the night. They thought it would be safer. They were wrong. At 3 in the morning, the narrator woke to Peach growling low and steady. The dog was staring out the window that faced the mine shaft. Moonlight filtered faintly through the trees, and in that dim silver glow the narrator saw them. 5 figures moving through the woods. They were carrying someone. The person was bound, gagged, thrashing desperately, muffled cries breaking through the night.
The narrator's first instinct was to grab his phone, but before he could dial, movement caught his eye. Another man stood pressed against the opposite window, face inches from the glass. His eyes were wild. His skin was caked in dirt. He looked like he hadn't bathed in weeks. Peach lunged at the window with a snarl that rattled the glass. The man staggered back into the darkness. The narrator shouted for his brother, grabbing his gun. "We need to leave. Now." There was no hesitation. His brother grabbed the keys, his own pistol, and whistled for Peach. They sprinted out the cabin door. 2 more figures stood near the car, silhouettes in the moonlight. Their faces were shadowed, but their presence was enough. The narrator raised his gun, shouted for them to back off. For a second, nobody moved. Then, Peach barked, an eruption of rage and warning. The men melted back into the forest.
The brothers leapt into the car, gravel spraying under the tires as they tore down the road. Breathless, shaking, the narrator explained what he'd seen, the figures carrying the bound man into the woods toward the mine. The first bar of cell service appeared miles later. He called the police, voice trembling as he described everything. The next day, a team was sent to investigate. They found signs of life near the mine, discarded food, traces of waste, makeshift bedding. They even found a man, delirious and weak, wandering near the shaft. But the 5 figures, the ones carrying someone, they were gone. The brothers never learned who the man was, if he survived, or if the authorities believed the whole story. The updates stopped. No arrests were made. No explanations were given. The cabin was abandoned again. They never went back.
In the years since, the narrator has read the rumors. Tales of feral people living in the Appalachian wilderness, stories of hidden communities cut off from society, generations surviving by their own brutal rules. He doesn't know if what they saw was that or something worse. He only knows that there was a man dragged into the dark that night, a man no one ever accounted for. And the silence around him, much like in the first story, is what terrifies him most. Because unanswered questions don't fade, they wait, they grow, and they turn the mountains into something you never escape, not even when you leave them behind.